Thank you very much. And after this fantastic talk about citizen science in the humanities, I'm really pleased to follow, and thank you for the invitation to present on Citizens Create Knowledge, Knowledge Creates Citizens. As we said, we face a global phenomenon, but we also face global problems. Coming from my disciplines, we have 9 million species disappearing at an alarming rate, and no policy has so far halted it, and no evidence from science so far. So we have missed policy goals. On the other hand, on the other hand, we have about 7 billion people with their own agendas as well, and there are millennium goals which we haven't managed to fulfill either, and there is scientific evidence, but so far we haven't reached that goal. And I think we can't not just simply generate and communicate scientific knowledge that is not sufficient to combat neither biodiversity loss or other urgent issues. And knowledge of traditional and ordinary science citizens are possibilities for innovation. And as I just talked to Jean-Claude Bürgermann doing coffee, and it's also a missed opportunities. We have how many scientists are around and how many people are around, and there's so much expertise, and it would be a shame to lose this. And also, apart from that, it's happening already. We've just heard about some fantastic projects in the humanities, in environmental research, I think, or in ecosystem research. This has been very common that most of our data sets on species are actually generated by volunteers. So there was a recent a study on European monitoring schemes, and 95% of the data are actually contributed by volunteers. And for example, recent Nature climate change paper on climate shifts and responses of species, it was calculated that 1.2 million volunteer hours went into this. So this is actually a phenomenon which is not new, but which has it's also leading, linking to the Oxford Dictionary. I think it's an old tradition, and I think we've maybe forgotten about this. But also in new techniques like biomedicine. For example, the Folded game, originated in the US, is using online gaming computer facilities in order to develop new algorithms for protein enfolding. And for example, there has been a call for the Ebola proteins, but also for AIDS. On the other hand, something very far removed, like galaxies, image classification is being used in order to classify galaxies, and new galaxies have been found. So already thousands or hundreds of thousands of volunteers are already engaging in this, and I think what we need to do is to embrace this and to build the structures to build the infrastructure and the capacities to develop this further. So obviously, and I think this is how my previous speaker already said, citizen science has really originated in the Anglo-Saxon world, and there have been some landmark publications, for example, from the UK, the US, or there's the Atlas of Living Australia, and societies have been formed in these countries. And also the EU commissioned a report 2 years ago about an in-depth report on the environmental citizen sciences, but it's not only in the environmental sciences where citizen science plays a role. In Europe, we had the development of a green paper, which has now been gone through a consultation and been published as a white paper by Spanish colleagues from the Socientize team. And we know all that co-design and co-production is crucial in all the Sustainability Research Council schemes or research schemes across the EU with Future Earth and Horizon 2020. At a European scale, we have established the European Citizen Science Association, of which I'm a board member. And in Germany, we have established the Bürgerschaften Wissen platform, or this, Citizens Creates Knowledge, Creates Science, of which Mr. Tochtermann is also in the advisory council. So, but what is the motivation here? So the goal, EXA was announced at the Green Week in 2013, and the goal is to motivate 5 million citizens within the next 5 years to participate, so this is the goal. But I think the EU Commission really sees it as a political goal, that it's a highly valuable opportunity for offering enhanced levels of participation in assessing and determining the success of, for example, EU environmental politics. And when our center, the German Environmental, the Integrative Center of Biodiversity Research was opened, the former environment minister said to us, and don't forget the people, to involve them in biodiversity research, even if it's very fundamental, basic and not necessarily applied research. And we also have a call from the German government where it's written in the coalition contract that we want to involve citizens and stakeholders from civil society consistently in the discussion about future projects, it says only discussion, and the design of research agendas. I would go further to also involve them actively in research. We want to develop new forms of citizen participation and the communication of science and merge them into an overall concept. So, what are the goals of citizen science? These are just some draft goals. So first of all, to the active participation of citizens in scientific processes, coming from data acquisition to processing to true co-design and co-production of research. Then the policy goal of really increasing scientific literacy and empowerment of citizens by increasing understanding, acceptance, uptake and implementation of research, which needs to be transparent and responsive in society. And then, from a research point of view, so it's sometimes seen probably as a burden, and I added a slide after the talk from Broggemann. I think the innovation potential is not yet realized. It is happening, and by engaging a variety of knowledge domains and inducing also new perspectives, we can actually reach innovation and form new partnerships. So I think citizen science isn't just one blob, but I think there are different levels of participation, from passive observation and communication of research needs, which is very often seen as the main domain of citizen science. But I think we can go for, there are, and I think this has been mentioned just now by the previous speaker, there is also active participation to co-production, or projects where actually citizens come up with the questions and the design and then look for partners in established science systems or do it themselves. And I think we have to actually move across this whole claviature and use and enrich this potential. So the motivation really for citizen science comes from 3 angles. So it's a scientific knowledge generation, definitely. But it mingles, the engagement factor is both the personal interest and the societal relevance. And I think here we have to move, and there are different forms of citizen science. In order to give you some data of that there is actually potential and there is a willingness to participate, there was a survey in Germany in 2014 where they asked 1,000 people, and they said, would you be in general interested in participating in scientific research? And over half of them actually said yes, they would be tentatively interested, and a third were definitely interested. Then when we asked them as a team, well, where in the stage of research process would you be interested in? It's interesting, people are interested in actually asking the questions, not so much in designing the research. Data collection is something which maybe comes to mind. Also analysis, documentation, but also publication and communication. And they can, and here I think we have to see how citizens can be involved in the whole of the research process. But now, following the first talk, I think there was this hesitance in the Science 2.0 or open science consultation that researchers were maybe a bit hesitant, and that's why I included just this slide this morning. That's why I haven't translated it. And at our Helmholtz annual event or annual conference, there was a poll, a TED poll, and where people were asked, so many researchers then or scientists, what their position was on citizen science. And I was actually quite pleased with this result. So a third actually said it's high time that the civil society gets engaged or in science more. I think this is a good result. Then there was the second one is, yes, there should be more participation, but there should be limits. A third one was a bit more skeptical. We see potential, but we have doubts about data quality, and there we're holding a conference or workshop next month, also here in Hamburg, with Professor Tochtermann and the team from Kiel here. And so only very few said, and maybe that was obviously biased, but it was an anonymous survey. They said, well, actually, amateurs don't have anything to say in science. But I would say these are non-institutional scientists who may want to get engaged. Also in Germany, but also worldwide, there is a lot of interest in the press, and we have got a lot of press coverage where there are also doubts whether citizen science could be misused as cheap. And I think we already said that it's not necessarily a cheap opportunity, but also that citizens might be misused as just cheap labor and not incorporating the whole capacities. So, and this is where we come in with our Gewiss project, Bürger schaffen Wissen, and this is the German citizen science capacity building program, where we are trying to, where we're establishing a citizen science platform with networking opportunities, a dialogue forum, and advisory board. We are looking at, we try to evaluate the, at least the German scientific scene on citizen science with opportunities, challenges, capacity, and demand, and develop practical citizen science resources, for example, a guide, film, as well as web portal. And most importantly, at the moment, we are developing the, co-developing the Citizen Science Strategy 2020 for Germany, to which I'll come later. We are a consortium of the Leibniz and the Helmholtz Institutes, together with university partners and funded by the Research Ministry of Germany. And we had a kickoff last summer with a big think tank in Berlin, followed by several dialogue forums which are ongoing over this year, and you can inform yourself over the, at our website, and reports are all downloadable, but they are in German because they are meant for a German public, especially because we're working with German citizens. We are obliged to publish them in German, but there will be English publications as well. You can also go onto our website, where, which is managed by the Museum for Natural History and the Wissenschaft im Dialog, where citizen science projects are listed and people can actively participate, but also where our resources are and all documentation of the fora are listed. And through these fora, we want to work with citizen science projects and with actors from science, practice, and policy to look at how citizen projects are actually devised, going from an idea and development phase, which is often forgotten, a start and initiation phase, which can be lengthy, a project and learning phase, and an evaluation and benefits phase. And most importantly, we're at the moment having drafted a Citizen Science Strategy 2020 for Germany, based on contributions from more than 200 people who are joined our meetings from over 80 organizations. And out of the think tank came 4 visions, which I would like to relate to you. So in 2020, citizen science is an integral part of German society, with active co-design and co-production of research in science and society that is valued, rewarded, and living or alive. Citizen science is a recognized, supported, and regular practiced approach to research. It brings innovation potential by integrating diverse knowledge pools and extensive or intensive involvement for the collection and analysis of large data scales, sets in space and time. It is a widely used approach in all areas of science, which also includes disadvantaged and marginalized groups in society in research processes, and is well communicated to the public and is funded based on newly developed evaluation criteria. It is a reliable science approach with web-based infrastructures that support both quantitative and qualitative citizen science projects as a trusted and privacy-compliant environment, and is a motivation to participate for 2 million people in Germany in research projects. I think a lot of these goals have already have been mentioned in the Open Science consultation. And therefore, I would like to go into some of these more targets which the citizen science strategy goes into. So we analyze opportunities and demands. I will skip over this. But I think what we need to do, or what we think what we need to do, is we have to develop capacities in both science, society, education, media, and structural capacities. And in this forum, I will focus on the science capacities. And these have been developed by contribution of more than 200 participants. So if I go through these are obviously only draft. These will go through a consultation this summer. So what we see is that we need a shift in science culture for citizen science, And first of all, we lack academic excellence criteria, and this links to some of the talks this morning, that actually people, you can't, it's very difficult to value citizen science, and it can be actually devalued because it doesn't have any reward system. This comes to award mechanisms and career options which are often lacking and which can be negative actually for scientists to engage. It also lacks guidance and training, but more fundamentally, I think the funding system at the moment, not only in Germany but internationally, I think lacks the flexibility for co-design and co-production. So really in normal research projects, it's actually not possible to do proper citizen science at the moment. And so we're working with the funding bodies and the research councils to look into this. And we'll have a workshop later on in June in Berlin for this. Then I think this was mentioned by the Open Science consultation as well. We need a strong data infrastructure. And this workshop was actually led by Professor Tochtermann, and where we need quality standards for data management, simple protocols for the collection, semi-automated quality assurance protocols, and repositories, which could be larger research institutions, libraries, or networks. And then obviously, in citizen science, we also need to develop quick feedback mechanisms to involve citizens. They can't wait for the ISI publication to come out, which is obviously which may not be accessible to them. So there must be other ways. And for example, a dot on Google Maps or other. I think that there have been several mechanisms explored already. I think a common theme already was this morning that we need a technical infrastructure as well to accommodate Science 2.0 or open science, so establish infrastructures, advisory services, and arrangements for citizen science. We also need to see that Citizen Science 2.0 is part of the scientific evaluation system for researchers and research institutions. This mirrors the first part. And there we actually embrace the potential for innovation and creativity. Then also, I think our Minister for Research and Education, she said, there's also innovation potential in technical advances of new instruments and new sensors. She said this in an interview just recently. And so, for example, we can develop new sensors that are easy to use. The era of online availability, that you've got your sensor in your pocket with your smartphone, apps for data acquisition and dispatching, they are rapidly developing, but and we should make increased use of, or it is already being used, new media, social media, and so on. But here it also needs appropriate funding mechanisms to support this. And finally, I think we shouldn't forget there are also legal issues and intellectual property issues, and this is what the workshop is going to be on in April, in early May in Hamburg, where we have to look in copyright aspects in terms of data collection and dissemination, portals, metadata, basic accessibility of data, but also privacy aspects of, if, for example, if you log on your data and people know where you're surveying, this may be this is not a non-trivial aspect. And for example, Citizen Science Project also said they need some kind of insurance, for example, if accidents happen during data collection. But we don't only need capacities in science, but more so also in society. So we need evaluation for good volunteering management in citizen science. And here we can learn from volunteering management from other sectors. So there are quality management guidelines and we have to adapt those. And there needs to be also a culture of appreciation of volunteers, and that they're not just willing workers, but that we communicate at an eye level. And that there is a recognition of citizen scientists, and they may actually gain also recognition in their other professions for this. We need to strengthen existing structures, for example, NGOs, learned societies, or academies as coordinators to facilitate network and training. And we need to promote motivation and all kinds of or forms of participation. So moving from low entry barriers, so that you just have to, for example, use your iPhone in order to photograph the night sky in order to assess light pollution, to involvement of the expertise which is out there and which could be much greater than anyone working in academia at the moment for a specific field in data analysis and communication. And here we just have to, for example, that's only an example, taken into account age and social structures as well as time allocation, which may be different to scientists which work in a professionally in a science job. Thirdly, we also have to develop capacities in education and media and embrace this. So, how do we actually include citizen science approaches in education? I think Jeffrey mentioned already, we should also embrace that in higher education and integrate this in university teaching. But we should explore wider possibilities as well as limitations, explore the role of museums, archives and libraries, as well as young scientist formats. And here we should, for example, also integrate extracurricular learning sites and methods in curricula of schools, for example, and embrace the notion of learning by doing, that there is a deep understanding not only of scientific process, but for example of environmental processes or social processes, for example through citizen science projects. And we can use media actually to communicate with citizen science or actually to develop citizen science projects. And I think we've been approached by several media science journalists who are covering this system at the moment, and they said, well, we play a crucial role, not just at the end, but for example throughout the system, throughout the process of citizen science projects. And last but not least, I think we do need structural capacities, and we can't just, it's a bit difficult to slot them into one of those pool, either science or society. So I think we do need development of training and education tools, guidance, and for example, train-the-trainer workshops. We need financing and development of new funding structures really for citizen science. That, for example, includes also remuneration of volunteer researchers. I think one idea is, for example, to establish these people who can stand in both worlds. So who could be citizen science coordinators, either in scientific institutions or in NGOs. Research funding should also look into funding scoping phases to initiate and co-design new collaborative projects, which is often done which there is often not enough time for. For citizen science, I think the longevity also needs to be taken into account, and there should be some long-term funding for example, existing citizen science projects. But citizen science projects also said to us they need some subsidy funds for really small projects, like 5,000 euros for a room. This is usually not attainable to them, and bureaucracy would be too high to apply for this, but this is often what it needs in order to get bottom-up research done. Or for a car hire, something like this. And then I think we are already engaging with the European Citizen Science Association in networking of citizen science activities and with our GEWIS program across Germany. And so we need platforms for linking existing citizen science projects and exchange of expertise, for example, through websites or dialogue forums. And this should be complemented by public events, competition, and there is the plan to have an international citizen science conference in Berlin in 2016, and we hope we can send out the invitation. It's still in the planning. So, but who is the one to implement it? It's not only science. So science, obviously universities and research institutes need to play their roles, but also I think here we have to just from the start work in partnership. And work in partnership with societies, for example, with NGOs and learned society academies, also existing citizen science projects, as well as non-organized citizens. We have to work with educational institutions and also higher education, obviously. But also use those extracurricular education institutions like museums, botanical gardens, zoos, or archives. And crucially, I think there needs to be, or we are engaging in dialogues, or the research councils are actually coming to us and funding bodies to look for solutions how this could be empowered. But of course, they need the evidence that citizen science creates an added value. And here, I think we're talking to research councils, trusts, business, but also national governments, and obviously DG Research and Environment is helping here as well. So, the Citizen Science Strategy 2020 for Germany will go into a public consultation in 2015, and we hope that we can launch this. We're at the moment in the development phase with the advisory body, as well as with citizen science projects. And this will be an online consultation. There will be the opportunity to send consolidated position papers, and they will be also discussed in the different workshops we have, thematic workshops, and the launch is planned for 2016. Thank you, and I hope you can contribute. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your talk. Are there questions? Yes, I see two. First one, second one.
Thank you very much for a very informative and intensive presentation. You've given us a fairly detailed look at the various measures that are needed to get the project off the ground. Let me be the devil's advocate for a moment and ask you, let me tell you that I'm still trying to understand the basic rationale behind the whole thing. Is this some kind of an educational initiative for the people as a whole? Are we trying to get people away from trashy TV programs and let them do something meaningful? Why would they be interested? I mean, the public at large. Is this a response to the fact that the idea of a publicly funded university is dying? Do we have to find alternatives for making or for creating science? And finally, what is the relationship between existing universities, if they continue to exist in their present form, to this form of citizen science?
Okay. Actually, we came from a science perspective only, and education was brought to us afterwards. And I think to take a normative approach to this would be, I don't know, it's a waste of time. I think or it's not a waste of time. I think there is an educational aspect to it, but this shouldn't be the first aspect. This should be a byproduct. But I think there is the knowledge and expertise which is in society, which can be embraced and harnessed to lead to innovation potential in science. I think there is a partnership. And I think this is already happening, so I think we don't need to necessarily foster it, but we do need to foster the networking between the established science and the volunteer science. So I don't know whether this answers the question. I think universities still have to go a long way because some of them are actually not aware of the potential that is out there. So for example, let me know, so there are actually too few at the moment evaluations of the scientific potential of citizen science, but one, for example, is the folded game where they looked at the generation of an algorithm through online gamers who didn't know anything about molecular biology. And they came up with a better algorithm within 3 months than was published before. And at the same time, a team of scientists in London came up with a similar good, not the same, algorithm for protein folding. And so I think there is just potential out there which could be, embraced.
Yes, thank you. I'm Lambert from Hanover, and I wonder, from my point of view, there is one hugely successful popular platform for citizen science that has grown without any kind of state funding, organically bottom-up, that is about building a structured, proven body of knowledge with many campaigns for data collection from citizens and a huge international audience, and we all know what I speak about, of course, and that is Wikipedia. Mm-hmm. And I was really wondering a bit about the lack of any kind of mentioning that, and could it be that this is just something that happened in the to be mentioned in the Twitter conversation about your talk, that the lack of government funding, and that this is not the kind of organization that is government funding, leads to that you don't go into this platform and try to learn and cooperate with them. That would be sad. But it's just a question.
Well, I actually had Wikipedia and Wikimedia actually on my. I wanted to actually present this, but because we had the humanities beforehand, I concentrated on the more on natural sciences. But apologies for this. I think we are in touch with Wikimedia, which is the organization between. But what I think one point you raise is whether, what I hear is whether funding might actually be counterproductive. And there are lots of initiatives which are risen out of communal spirits or out of energy, which is not dependent on funding. And whether do I get this right? So I think we have to, if we work with citizen science, we have to realize this potential and strengthen it in some ways, and not smother it through, for example, funding. Although I talked about funding, so I think this is a balance. But for example, the UCL project of transcribing Bentham, obviously, if you have to provide the infrastructures behind it, often you do need funding for that. Or for example, if you do coordination of volunteers and volunteer management, that is often done through structures. So, but I do take your point that sometimes, or often, or many of the citizen science projects have started without any funding, and they will continue to do so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we have a very last question, short answer.
Yes, thank you for your talk. And I go back to the first question again. I'm a sociologist, and yeah, I was not sure what kind of expertise is actually needed from the citizens in contrast to the professional scientist, because I recognize that there are a lot of premises in your goal. It's about the innovation potential that is not yet realized, but what is exactly the empirical basis of your talk? So I think it's a question, what exactly goes beyond the projects you mentioned. There's always the best practice project folded in the center, the wisdom of the crowds, but we know that there are professional scientist with a specific kind of knowledge and with a specific kind of expertise, and of course you know Harry Collins with his different kinds of expertise. I would need more empirical data on how to realize such big movement we are talking about here.
Okay, this is why it's called capacity building program, because I think the empirical data are to an extent missing. There are other examples. For example, I think from my profession at least, I know that taxonomic expertise is actually dispersed through society and not necessary in academia. So for some very specialized groups, also we know from museums that they have experts in society who they work with, and that could be, for example, experts in ancient bone flutes. And that expertise might not be at the university. Or, for example, if we see that there are experts in ancient Greek and Latin around who can actually help in translating this. So I think that is true, but I think you are right, and this is what we're working for. We have to build up the evidence base to actually see what the added benefit of citizen science contribution is, and it's not, and I would like to say it's not a surrogate. It's complementary. It should be complementary. There will be overlaps, but I think it is additional.